Hey guys, Matt here from DCOblogger.com. I'm going to be going through a really interesting concept, and it's the concept of working at home. And if workspaces, working in, I guess, virtual reality at home, is a thing that we're moving towards. And I think the whole coronavirus thing has kind of put a catalyst on this sort of thinking on how we can work at home or what the options are in situations like this. Although obviously coronavirus is not a good thing, um, it just got the world thinking in different ways. So I wanted to just go through that if we were to go in that direction, what is it going to look like? And what's kind of needed from a platform to enable such a functionality and what the benefits may be and what the cons may be, right? So we already know the benefits of working from home. Who wouldn't love to do that? Commute is a big issue. Going to work in a train, obviously all the carbon emissions that we are as a species putting into the planet and in our airs and ecosystems just because we have to go to work and back. Everyone, I know I used to drive like an hour to work and an hour back from work. So imagine the time saving, the cost saving. Some industries may suffer, like the car industry, the vehicle industry, transport industry, and governments will have a lot more money to spend instead of spending it on bettering infrastructure, which is a big deal here in Australia. We could probably spend it on other things. But why this comes about is because of my recent tweet, which was this one over here: 20 plus buildings in Decentraland, all DCG co partners. This is how a virtual business space should look like. So the other day I came across this really, really cool space here. It's a pretty massive area if you can walk through it as much as you want. But basically, these massive skyscraper type buildings with these logos and brands on it, right? This one says Curve, Merkel Science, and if you just keep going down, you'll see a bunch of different names, some very familiar, like I saw Coinbase, I saw Kraken. And if I were to Google, something like Kraken DCG, then you will notice that DCG, to see you staying in the DCG family, Kraken. So you always see, whenever I used to Google any of these companies, and you can also do something like this. So you can see digital currency group portfolio, and there's this really cool image that shows all the companies that DCG have an investment stake in or are helping out in some way. And all of these companies, all the companies that I found were in these lists. If not, if I were to Google them, then they would show up. So I was like, wait a second, this must be DCG land. If you don't know who DCG is, they're basically a big investor firm. I believe they own 1% of Bitcoin, but they're led by Barry Silbert. So these guys build and invest in blockchain projects, right? And they kind of led by Barry Silbert, 201,000 followers, big investor in Decentraland. You can see Mana Token is one of the ones here. He's been on TV and he kind of talks about blockchain and how it's going to go. I think he ran the Drop Gold campaign a while ago to try and influence and get people thinking differently in terms of investment. But yeah, I found this land, and all of these buildings were basically DCG land, DCG buildings. I know that they have a mana stake and probably a land stake. And if I look at the wallet, then it had like 3,700 plus lands. And they were basically, there's a really good map here. This is made by a community member, Spidey Monkey. And he built this out, and you can see all of this green area. So all of this land that I showed you, all of these buildings, these were built in these quadrant areas. Yeah, I'm not sure if they're built in one or all four of them, but this is the area where they are. Um, and if you look at this, which kind of goes through the top 20 owners, not really sure about these numbers and if they're correct or accurate, because I know that DCG themselves or this land wallet owner themselves own like 3,700 plus lands if you check them out. But you can just see a bunch of areas that they own. They pretty much own most of the southwest like border quadrant, right? I think they have some more land here, and maybe they have a couple more wallets. Who knows? But the reality is that if anyone's going to create some sort of a workspace, then they have to have a kind of connection and network with all these companies and have some sort of pulling power to bring them in or propose to them something, right? DCG seem like the perfect candidate. They have big names out there like Ripple. They've invested in Ripple. They've invested in Kraken, Coinbase, a bunch of different projects that may be familiar to you guys. But if you were to just kind of look through things, and yes, these buildings aren't really functional. They just have like the the brand names on them. You can't really go in them, or if you do, there's not really much to see. But it honestly won't take much to make them functional. You can go in there. If they build out some meeting rooms, they actually probably don't even need this much space. But if they were to build out some meeting rooms, a simple functionality once Decentraland allow streaming video, streaming audio, streaming your computer directly there, then suddenly you'll have a workspace where you can kind of look at your. It's I guess emulating the real world work environment. What do people do? They look at each other's screen if they need to. In fact, most people probably work hours or the majority of their hours on their own projects. They communicate a little bit with the people around them, maybe half an hour, maybe a meeting. Um, and then they go for lunch, they have a bit of leisure time, and then they continue working, right? So if you could stream your computer and your activity along with other people that are in your team around you, from home. So if I were to go in here and kind of look around and I can see my friends' computers and see what they're working on, I can, I guess, chat to them and audio chat to them as well and be like, hey, Brad, what are you working on? I can point to things and and if he can see what I'm pointing to on his computer, then he can see I can communicate in a better way. Voice chat, obviously, text chat is there. Everything's there. It just needs to be enabled within Decentraland or any platform that wants to tackle this sort of thing. And I know for a fact that High Fidelity, and if you weren't familiar with High Fidelity, maybe you're familiar with Second Life. So Second Life used to be this online virtual space. I don't think they were virtual reality, but they were an online space where you can kind of go in there as an avatar, start a business, walk around, talk to people, socialize. It got really big and popular back in, I think, the early 2000s. But it blew up, right? It got millions and millions of visitors. And then uh, the owner of that company, Philip Rosedale, I believe his name is, he branched off and created High Fidelity, which was a VR space that you could build your own scenes in VR and kind of have them as separate servers and have people join those and do fun things in, right? One of the issues that one of the hurdles that they ran into was the fact that the VR industry wasn't growing at a pace that they wanted it to. So scalability wasn't there. Maybe they got 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 people in the one location, maybe. But to really build a business out of this and have some sort of a solution or some sort of a broader interest for developers and an incentive for them to make money, they really have to crack the thousands and tens of thousands of people entering these VR spaces. So the technology, people don't really have VR headsets. There's not enough VR headsets out there in people's hands yet to justify this sort of a direction. But what's happened recently is High Fidelity made a pivot to start focusing on workspaces. So that what they're starting to do is, all right, let's see if we can build a purpose for virtual reality for workspaces. So they're kind of approaching companies and seeing if they can build some sort of workspace, a virtual reality workspace solution for them. So that's an interesting pivot, and it shows that there is some sort of a promise, according to their data, that there is an interest in virtual workspaces, and it kind of makes a lot of sense. Just thinking about the benefits, like I said, you can save on a lot of things, carbon emissions, you can save on time, effort, you can stay at home, obviously you can have more family time, and I think people will be a little bit more happier. The social aspect is going to suffer, so we need to obviously emulate some sort of a social aspect of things. I think that's why Decentraland, where everything's kind of built on, you got other people's lands and buildings that you can go and visit. If I walk around the corner over here, there are some monuments. There's a park. You can see there's some artwork over here. It's pretty cool. So it's going to emulate the real world. Maybe you're going to have some real graffiti artists come in and draw graffiti on some of these buildings. More artists come in and develop this space. So it's not just going to be a place where you can go in and work. Maybe you can go in and work for an hour or a couple of hours with your buddies and get some projects done, then go visit these spaces and talk to different people. Maybe you can even network with different companies. So say, for example, this company here, Wire, have a partnership with this company. Maybe a couple of these can go straight into the meeting, or maybe once it's a lunchtime or something, everyone goes to these park areas to explore. They can bump into people that maybe have wearables and t-shirts that represent their company, and you can chat to them, see what they're talking about, partnerships, collaborations, a lot more communication both ways instead of being in a restrictive physical environment which doesn't allow this sort of thing, right? Communication has gone a long, long way than what it used to be. It used to be just writing. Now, then it became telephones and mobile communication, computer, visual communication, media, social media is kind of taking off in terms of communication. And it's just become to a point where you can really just work at home. You can send an email to people if you want to. You can call up your manager and ask him things. In most office circumstances, you don't really have to go to work. So it really is kind of, I think the race right now is to build a platform that is enticing for people to come and work from these virtual spaces. I think getting virtual reality headsets to a phase where they're not heavy on your head, they're not straining to the eyes, they're not expensive, they're lighter. You can kind of see through them so that you have more, you don't get dizzy wearing them. There's a lot more, I guess, usability in that sense. Yeah, things look beautiful, but the practicality is that if I were to give it to a couple of my parents, if I were to give it to my parents or my grandma or people over 40, 50, a lot of them would have issues having that on their head for more than an hour, let alone more than 20 minutes. So it's got to come to a stage where it's going to seem seamless just putting it on a headset or some way to communicate with this sort of virtual world. But this is a great start. If I walk around, you can see there's a bunch of different really cool companies, different sort of buildings on sizes. And again, I'm pretty sure this is DCG owned just from my little research that I've done. I mean, Barry Silbert himself retweeted that tweet. And you can imagine if there's elevators to go all the way up, you can communicate things, you can host events and parties, and it's going to be like globally you can come into this space where all these companies are working at, and networking is just going to go through the roof because you can just communicate directly with someone. Like how often in your physical workspace do you think about calling a company you're thinking about collaborating with, or you bump into them? You don't do that in the real world, but in the virtual world, that can be done, right? You can bump into them over here. You can say, hey, what's up? Talk to them with a voice chat. Ask them what they're working on. You can build a profile for yourself. You can have users. You can have a friends list so you know when that person is online. You can set meetings and go to them. So it's going to be an interesting thing seeing if it goes in that direction. I am personally invested in Decentraland, or my play was to be someone interested in business. Like I wanted to see how these businesses develop, how they can build an economy, how they can work from these virtual spaces. Maybe a place where people can come and pitch products. Maybe maybe a Shark Tank type area where people can pitch their crypto products, anything new to investors. And I think this is a great start to bring these people on the platform. I think this is still a long way. I mean, it looks beautiful, looks pretty, but like I said, functionality wise and actually convincing people to come and work in these spaces and proving that there is actual value in working in these spaces as opposed to working um, in a physical space has to happen. So I think the coronavirus kind of put a catalyst in getting people to think differently, seeing what the feasibility of working at home is. I know people in Australia, companies are getting people to work at home, so they're kind of working on that communication side of things to see, hey, maybe in the next 2 to 4 weeks, there's going to be a shift to people wanting to stay and work at home. Maybe some companies are going to realize, wait a second, we can continue doing our work as efficiently as we used to by everyone just being at home, and maybe we'll do a 2-day work week. So we're going to see what comes out of this coronavirus, I guess, the shifting that the world is going to make in that sense. Hopefully it gets contained and people kind of stop dying and being infected. But it's just changing things. Like catalysts like this change the way people think and do business, basically. Like a lot of people relied on China to supply the products. I can't imagine how Amazon's doing. A lot of products on Amazon come from China, or a lot of companies that have material coming in from China. I just can't imagine the economic, especially in the e-commerce world, issues that they're going to be having. So it's just going to be, it's obviously really sad, but it's also going to be very interesting to see after this the dust settles how things are going to change. But yeah, a couple of words on this space and virtual working and what it might lead to. If you have any other companies that you know are tackling this and that are actually onboarding people to work in an office environment in a way that is great for all, and it is actually working out, let me know, because I'd love to investigate that. But yeah, that's it for this.